guys, this is Steve Darcey with GoEngineer, and today I wanted to do a quick little getting started video, some parts, assemblies, and some drawings. And I found this little picture of a hinge on the internet, and that's what we'll model up. So we're going to start from scratch. I've got three components. I've got the two hinge plates and then the pin in the middle. Put them together, do an assembly, and create a quick little drawing. So let's get started. So we're going to start from scratch. Start with just the regular part template, or if you're on novice mode, just hit part. Either one's fine. Once it's open, you can check your units down here in the corner. So there's a little IPS, and I meant inches, so that's good. And we'll just go ahead and start sketching on the front plane is fine. Do a new sketch. When you just start a new sketch, it automatically takes you into sketch mode. So we'll just grab the line command. Try and always start at the origin somewhere. And then after I do my line, I'm going to go back, touch the endpoint. Don't click it, just touch it. Or you can hit A on the keyboard one time, and it's going to automatically go into an arc command. From here, we need to put some dimensions on there. So we'll say this guy is about 2 inches, something like that. The radius of this guy is going to be 0.125. Make it kind of small. And then I want to put what the arc is inside there. So I'm going to pick on each of the individual points there. So all three of them. Just pull that out in the proper direction and place it, and we'll make that about 70 degrees. Make sure it comes back around a little bit. From there, we can go right into sheet metal. If you don't have the sheet metal tab, right click on any of the tabs and turn on sheet metal. Everybody with SOLIDWORKS has it. And you'll notice it puts the stuff that you can't click on, it turns that stuff off. So the only thing I can do here is base flange or tab, so I'll pick on that. In this dialog box, I can tell what the thickness is. You can see what it's doing is offsetting that profile to the outside. We can flip it to go to the inside, but then the part will touch itself. So we'll leave it at that. I also want to tell it it's 3 inches. But when I do that, I'm going to switch this instead of blind, which is a single direction. I'm going to say mid-plane. That looks pretty good. We'll say OK. So that looks pretty good. Then I need to put the little cut in the middle. So I'm just going to sketch on that face. Just start a new sketch. It automatically rotates you to it. I'm just going to get the rectangle command, start on the little edge. I didn't have to project geometry or anything like that. Automatically puts the relationships in there. I have mine turned off on the little eyeball. You can turn those guys on if you want, and you can select them, delete them if you want. I typically do work with them off though. Okay, once I have that guy in there, let's go into select mode. You can see it's not symmetric. I like to use symmetry. So there's a couple different ways you could do it. Some people use construction geometry. So if I do a center line from that point to the midpoint, let's find the midpoint there. There we go. Go back into select mode, or you can hit escape. Pick on the line, and you'll see we give you some of the relationships right there. You can also go over here and pick them here. So I can say that guy's horizontal. Now that gives me symmetry. If one side gets small, the other side has to get smaller. And we can add some dimensions. So I'm going to put this in at about 1.5. And let's make it 0.5. Looks good. And we'll do a cut. And I want it to go through both sides, so I'm going to say through all both. And there we go. Got a nice little cut in there. All right, then I want to put some, need some little fillets in there. Don't like the sharp corners, so just select on that. SOLIDWORKS does give you a couple little options, so I'm going to start the fillet command. I can select through geometry there. And 0.1, that's pretty small. I'll go ahead and accept that. Looks good. All right, then I need to stick this into something, so I need a screw hole. And so I'm going to pre-select the face that I want to start sketching on, and I'll go right into the hole wizard. Now it'll remember the last settings that you had. So in this case, I did have the last countersink. I do want to make sure that it goes through all the entire plate there, and it is a quarter inch. Okay, we'll go to the positions. This tells us how to put them in, and notice we're back into sketch mode. So I'm just going to go ahead and plop two of these guys out there, just out wherever, and I'm going to use construction geometry again, just to kind of put this in. Now when I draw this line, I'm going to hold down my mouse to drag. That way it picks the pencil up. Then I can put another line in there. Go into select mode. I'm going to hold down control, select on both the point and the entire line, and I'm going to do a midpoint relationship. What that does is it makes this whole thing symmetric. So when I move one, it moves the other. So now I just need to move these little endpoints of the holes to that. That way if I move this guy, you can kind of see they're both centered. So we'll go ahead and put some dimensions on it. Make this guy about, let's see what 75 looks like. That looks good. And then now I can use that line to do center to center. And 2 inches is good. Happy with that. Now we're fully defined. SOLIDWORKS tells us down here, fully defined. And we can hit the green check. And we've got some countersink holes in there. So as I'm doing these features, we're building up this little list on the side to do, if we need to go back in and edit these things, we can. So I'm just about done. If I want to give it a material, I can. I've got a couple of them in here. I'm just going to say it's plain carbon steel. And I need to put a material or a file property in here. So I'm going to put a description. And if I want to use, I'm going to go ahead and just put test in there for now. If I want to add the material, I can. And there's a little drop down. I could say, hey, go grab the material. Now notice what it's getting. It's getting that little formula there. So I can copy that. Control C, copy, paste it there. And I'm going to call this the A plate. And it's putting plain carbon steel A plate on there. I'll make that a little bigger. There you go. So that looks good. Go ahead and hit that. And now let's go ahead and save this out. Saving is kind of a little tricky thing. Let's go create a new folder. I'm going to do a, if you have job numbers or something, try and make a folder with that job number. This is going to be my Hinge assembly. And I'm going to put all my files in there. And I'm going to use that job number. And just some unique identifier, 01 is good. And if you want to add the description, you can. I'm going to go ahead and leave it blank for right now. We'll go ahead and hit save. And then the B side plate is almost exactly the same, except it's got the middle region, not the outside. So let's see what we can do to fix that thing. Let's just, most of the parts are exactly the same. We're going to do a save as. I'm going to do as save as, copy and continue. Actually, and open. There we go. And I'm going to call it 02. And we'll save that out. And always look up here to see which one you're editing. And what that does is it leaves both 01 and 02 open. So they're both open. Now I need to change this guy. So I just need to change the cut extrude. So just edit the sketch. And I'm just going to turn all that geometry to construction. And I'm just going to drag a rectangle. Put it in that corner. Drag a rectangle. Put it in that corner. Make sure it's all black. Black is good. Because this stuff is construction now, water can flow out of it. But now I've got these two pieces that don't have, they're completely watertight. So that's what it's going to use for that profile. So when I finish out of the sketch, notice it cuts that, not the other stuff. Now the only problem I have, SOLIDWORKS is good about telling you what you did wrong. So I have a fillet, and it says, hey, there's some edges that don't exist, so I'm going to edit the feature. And it's these little edges on the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and select on those. There we go. We'll just hit OK. It goes ahead and deletes the ones that are not there. And then now I've got a really good part. I may want to add a couple more. Should have added those in there quick. Put those guys on there. Looks good. All right, so now I have two parts. Now all I need is the pin to go in the middle. So again, we'll kind of start from scratch. Again, start on a plane, do a new sketch. This one I'm just going to get the line command. Drag kind of what a little pin shape should look like. Go ahead and start dimensioning it. So make that about, let's just make it 0.2. And occasionally, let me put one more thing of geometry in there, a center line. Center line and construction geometry are almost the exact same thing. But what this allows us to do is when I do a smart dimension between some regular geometry and the center line, it does a radius if I'm on one side, and I move my mouse over to the other side, notice it doubles the dimension. So I can place that out there, and now it's going to be a diametrical dimension. So this is going to be 0.25. This guy, notice it's automatically doubling the dimension. It's going to be 0.5. And then I'm going to hit escape. That gets me out of the diametric dimension, and we're going to make that 3 inches, and we're fully defined. Now since we have a center line in there, if I go to do a revolve, it's going to automatically use that center line to do the revolve. I can just hit the green check to OK that. All right, let's add a little bit more coolness to it. We'll put a fillet on there. I'll make that a little bit smaller. And I'll put a little chamfer down here on the bottom. Make that pretty small, 0.02. All right, a couple more things. Put your file properties in there. I'm just going to put in steel pin and save it. This is going to be my 03 part. And if you forgot to put the description in, notice we give you an option to put it in right there too while you're saving it. All right, looks good. I've got all the files open. Let's go back to our 01 part. And we're going to put this guy into an assembly. And when you first part that you put into assembly, if you just hit the green check, it's going to put that at the origin of where you modeled the first part. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and insert some more components. Just pick on 02 and just pick a point out there. Insert another component, put 03. There's my pin. Place that in there. All right, let's go ahead and save this. Now, assembly, same thing. I'm going to give it whatever that number is. And then maybe that's just going to be A01 for A for assembly. Looks good. All right. The first component that we put in, this 01 part, has a little F over here in the browser. That means it's fixed. If I try and grab it with a mouse, it can't move. This other guy over here, if I drag it, it can move. And notice parts go through parts. They're kind of like ghosts out there. Okay. So we need some way to constrain these things. If I left click, it's going to drag it. If I right click, it's going to rotate it. So I do typically try and right click and drag it and get it kind of close to where it needs to be. It's similar to how sketching works. If we select on a face, hold control, pick on another face, SOLIDWORKS gives us options to mate or constrain these entities. So I'm going to make that coincident, puts those two faces together. Now I just want to put this circular face to this circular face, and that's concentric. And now our hinge kind of works and functions. Of course, parts go through parts still. All right, let's check another thing real quick. Kind of rotate around to where I can see this little edge. And same thing, rotate around to where that I can see the little inside edge there. So here's what I'm going to do is grab this guy. If you hit the Alt command, just tap it one time. Then you can do this thing pin and hold. If you tab, it flips around to the other side. I can drop it in there. And it automatically constrains that. Now it actually puts two mate relationships on there. So any of these mates that we put on, we can of course go in and edit. And I'll edit one of these in just a bit. So that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. We need to check for interference. So let's calculate interference. Oh, we got some interference there. So we got some parts that are hitting other parts. So we need to figure out what's going on with that and fix those things. Now the good thing is I don't have to go all the way back to the individual parts to do that. I can actually change and modify these right here in the assembly. So you'll notice that my fillet's going into this other part. If I just double click on it, here's all the dimensions. Let's make that 0.55. And I'll hit the little rebuild button. That way I can see if that's out of there. Looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit more. So maybe 0.6. And that's the benefit. Of course, you can really check these out, make sure that they work good, and see if everything's going to be all right. Now I have the same issue here. So just double click. 0.6. I also could put a smaller fillet in there. Forgot to rebuild, so I'm going to have to rebuild that. There we go. And now let's check it out. So again, interference detection, calculate, and it says no interferences. So I'm happy with that. All right. Then I need to get this thing ready for a drawing. In order to do that, because this has a degree of freedom that's available to move, I'm going to constrain it. But before I do that, I'm going to create some configurations. So first configuration, let's actually just go to the properties on this. I'm just going to call this guy open. There we go. Let's add another configuration. And we'll call it 90 degree. And we'll add another one. Call it closed. And I'm going to put one more in here just for fun. I'm going to call it free. All right. And whichever is the active configuration, then that's the one that it's going to be open with. So we're going to do, let's just do open right now. Make that active. And we're going to go put a mate on here. So I'm just going to put it on between these two faces. I'm going to do an angle right here. So notice it's 135. I'm going to make that 180. Shows me a little preview. I'm happy with that. We'll go ahead and hit OK. Now, in the other configurations, sometimes it will, depending on what the setting is set to, it will suppress that mate. So I'm going to split the screen real quick. Let's open up the mates. I'm going to go to 90 degrees, make that active. So you'll notice that mate, that angle mate, is suppressed. We're going to unsuppress it. And then we're going to just double click on it. And there's the little dimension there. So we're going to change that to 90. Now before you just hit the OK checkbox, we got to tell it only to do it for this configuration. So now I can rebuild, see if that's what I want. Hit OK. I'm happy with that. So now I can kind of change from 90 degrees. If I double click on open, you can see how it's flipping it. If we go to closed, kind of same thing. Let's double click on that. He's already unsuppressed, so all I need to do is double click it, make it 0, and make sure it's set that flag to only this configuration. All right, so that should work pretty good. If I go to free, let's go ahead and suppress the angle, and that way it allows me to drag it. It's free to move, free to rotate. So now I have a open one. I can double click on it. I have a closed one, 0 degrees, and I have a halfway open 90 degree one. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it on open for right now. And my assembly looks good. I'm happy with it. Let's go ahead and save it. We'll go ahead and make a drawing. In this case, I like to print with a B size, 11 by 17. So select my default template. Here I'm looking at the assembly model. So just go and drag the top. It's going to automatically go to projected view. So I'm just going to pick a point for the top. That's the front. I'll call that top. This will be right side. And then before I place this, I'm going to hold down Control and I can drag this over. And now I can right click and that'll get me out of the project geometry mode. So I'm going to go ahead and when you select it, changes over to your document properties. I'm going to make that shaded mode. Let's go ahead and put a bill of material in there. I'll just accept the default. Plop that in. With the bill of material, we need to put some balloons in. You'll notice I don't have to tell it what the number of the balloon is. It's already there. Okay. If you want to align those, we have a tool for that called magnet line. So you just start like the line command. And I kind of messed that one up a little bit. So I'm going to pick on the balloon. You see my magnet line. Now I can drag it again. And we can just go pick those guys up. So that looks pretty good. We can squish them in if you want. We can move it around. And now they look nice and good. All right, so that's pretty good on this size. If you want to add some dimensions, you can. So we can just get smart dimension. Maybe I want kind of an overall length and width. Maybe I want an overall with the pin, head of the pin in there. There we go. So that looks pretty good. So those are some of my assembly dimensions. Let's go ahead and play with parts real quick. So we'll go back and make sheet number 2. I'm going to hit the little drop down. I've already got 01 open, so I'm just going to select on that. It's going to regenerate the little pane here. So it's just going to give me part views. So go ahead and plop these guys in. Go ahead and put a little isometric in. And I'm going to do a quick rebuild. And we're going to change some of these views. So I'll make this guy shaded mode. So he looks pretty good. And maybe I want to change these to where I can actually see the little hidden lines in there. So that looks pretty good. And then we'll tell it to go get all the dimensions are actually in the model. So I'll go tell it to get model items of the entire model into all the different views. And I also want to get where the center locations for the holes are and the whole callouts. So we'll just hit OK. It goes and grabs those. It is automated, so you do have to do a little bit of work. Come in here and clean this up a little bit. Any of the dimensions, if you want to move them from one view to the other, you just hold down Shift. And then now they're in the other views. So you just got to kind of pretty them up, make them look good. And there you go. So I didn't want to go too deep into anything, but I just wanted to give you a kind of nice roundabout view of part modeling, putting some of the parts into an assembly, and then getting some of the drawings out. Now, of course, I got 2 more drawings. I got the pin and the other plate B in there. But you see some of the automated stuff, title blocks, the bill of materials, the balloons. All that is pretty simple and easy to get away with. If you have any questions, just go to our tech support line. And hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Steve Darcey with GoEngineer. Thanks.